Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk all about how to use your intuition to make practical decisions. So many people, um, interesting, my YouTube live didn't work. Maybe it's working now. But that's okay. We're alive here, which is great. Hi, Jay Sayer. Good to see you. Um, so often, like there's so many people who talk about the importance of intuition, following your intuition, myself included. But then it's like, how do you actually do that? How do you actually listen to your intuition? What does it feel like? Um, why is it important to like listen to it, even though sometimes it doesn't make logical sense on the surface? We're going to get into all of that today. So, if you're here, feel free to say hello. If you're watching the replay, feel free to say hi. And yeah, DM me with any insights or anything that really resonates with you or helps you see things in a new way, um, as you listen to this live. So first, I'm gonna talk about a story of how I started being so disconnected from my intuition. I did that I didn't even really know what it felt like. I didn't even know how to listen to it. I didn't trust anything about what it said. So, put me back at, like, age 23, age 24. I just graduated from conservatory. I started playing violin at the age of 3, and so that was my whole life for a long time, and there's a lot more to that I'll get into maybe in another setting. That would be good to do a podcast episode, like, more deeply about all that. Actually, I think I already have one that's about my story or my journey. But I, had been so hardcore violin, violin, violin. Went to conservatory, did my undergrad, did my master's. I thought about not doing my master's in violin performance, but then I did it anyway because that was hi Remy, good to see you. Because that is what I was just trained to do. So I am out of my master's degree and I am so exhausted every single day. I am barely able to peel myself out of bed. I know that there's so much that I need to be doing, supposedly, right, on paper. There's so much that I need to be doing to keep my career afloat. I need to be the life of a working musician, especially like newer, fresh out of college and conservatory, regardless of what level you're at. And I was at a pretty high level. You still need to be playing wedding gigs, playing event gigs, like doing the kind of what most like classical musicians would call like boring work or paying your dues. This and teaching was like really something that I knew I was going to have to do. Um, and so I was like, Kate, you've got to get more effort going into this. I should be planning my own concerts. I should be, forming chamber music groups. I should be reaching out for more gigs. I should be promoting myself more. And I just couldn't seem to get myself to do those things. No matter how many productivity hacks I tried, no matter how many time management hacks I tried, I like joined Procrastinators Anonymous, like because again, I just was procrastinating so much, or at least that's what I was only looking at it in this very one-dimensional way at that time, which is like, I'm not getting myself to do the things that I should be doing. Not paying any attention to what my inner lived felt experience of existing was like. So now imagine that you're in this situation. You have been basically for 2 years straight, just like waking up every day, dreading the day. Maybe you don't even have to imagine. Maybe this is your real life right now. You wake up every day dreading the day. You think to yourself, okay, I should be taking better care of myself. I should be going for all these things. Like, I need to learn more. I haven't taken the action yet. So I just need to push myself to learn more about it, because if I learn more about it and if I do more research, then that'll be what prompts me to get into action. So then, a lot of my waking hours were all about like collecting information, reading articles, like to try to get myself to either do the things that I was supposed to be doing or find the perfect way to do the things that I was supposed to be doing. And so 2 years straight of this with very little variation. Yes, some days were a little bit different from others, like some days I had wedding gigs, some days I had a heavy teaching schedule, but the inner monotony was real. And then, like, cut to spring of that, 2 years later. "Hi, Daisy D Cakes, good to see you." And all of a sudden, this thought floats into my head. I should learn to knit. I literally had no, like, context for this. It's not like I'd seen a knitting advertisement, or it's not like I had anybody who knit in my life. Um, I had my world had narrowed so much by that time that I basically, like, didn't have friends that I saw on a regular basis. I was in a serious relationship that was pretty, like, emotionally abusive. Just everything had narrowed, 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 and I wasn't seeking out, like, information on crafting or anything like that, but this thought just floated in. "You should learn how to knit." And the quality of that thought, start to get into this. The quality of how that felt in my body was I didn't have any constriction that came up when I thought about that. I didn't feel like my center contracting. I didn't feel my chest collapse. I didn't feel like my shoulders raise. I didn't feel like churning in my stomach. I just felt this kind of neutral openness. And the tone of the voice that I heard in my head. And everyone thinks differently. So if you can't relate to this, like some people don't have an inner narrator, they just think in images. Some people think in in just emotions, like they just have a rush of an emotion or a knowing. So I have a lot of different of ones of these, but like this voice was very clear in this particular instance. It was just calm, neutral, kind of playful, curious. You should learn to knit. And my conditioning, like my all of my shoulds, basically everything that had been running the show up until that point of, you're a terrible person, you need to wake up and you need to be doing this, and why aren't you able to get yourself to like apply for wedding gigs and festivals and like all of that conditioning basically just slammed right on in on top of that. You should learn to knit voice saying, you can't even get yourself to do, like all the things you're supposed to be doing. You can't even get yourself to do like the basics. Like, why? There's no point in learning how to knit if you can't even get yourself to do these other things. Like, and anyway, like fun is a reward for like, again, it's very revealing of my mindset at the time. Fun is a reward for good effort. Fun isn't necessary in and of itself, is what I was thinking. And so for months after I started to hear this voice, I was like, just immediately my conditioning, my controlling, perfectionistic, high achieving, but with a, filter of self-hatred essentially. That voice inside of me was like stamping that down right away. But I had enough not going on in my life at this point. Like I had very little external pressure, luckily, at this point. Um, I didn't, aside from like making enough money to live on, which I was able to do with my teaching, and with the few gigs that I was doing, I didn't have anybody like breathing down my back, saying, you have to do this. Again, like for my whole prior life, I had been so externally driven and I had been in such tightly controlled environments with high demands that I just had to keep running on adrenaline to be able to meet those demands. And this was the first time in my life that I had enough space to basically only have whatever was going on inside be the impetus for what I was creating in my life. So, luckily, I had that just enough lack of external pressure that voice, you should learn to knit. That calm, spacious, open, coming more from like down here voice when I feel the energy of it in my body, it just kept saying the same thing. You should learn to knit. And so finally, I was like, you can s oh my god, I rolled my eyes to myself and I was like, "Fine, fine. This voice isn't gonna shut up. I'm gonna fucking learn to knit. Like, okay." As if I was being, like, coerced to have fun. So and I will tell you, like, the beginning of learning how to knit was this voice, "Well, you should learn for let's start to learn how to make that. Let's learn how to make that. Let's find a knitting group." All these little, just simple statements of, like, the very simple next step. That's another quality of this voice of truth for me, and I'm curious how this lands for you if you're listening. What are you hearing in what I'm saying? What are you noticing? What resonates with you about your own journey and your own life, and how the quality of this, like, inner narration and then the voice of truth, like, either is, the same as what I'm describing about my own experience, and how is it different for you? I would love to hear in the comments, if you're watching live or if you're watching the replay. So, please tell me all about it. So, but as I began to take more and more action, this voice kept supplying me with, like, the next step and the next step and the next step. And of course, like, because I had been conditioned, like, all of these shoulds, all of this frenzy, all of this worry, all of this, you need to be doing this, and you need to be doing this, and you need to be doing this. All of that was my conditioning that I had grown up with from my family that I grew up with, which was a super high pressure family. My parents were both very mentally unwell and put a lot of pressure on both myself and my sibling to, like, basically, like, get the esteem for the family, i.e., like, do really well in school and be incredible at, like, an extracurricular activity and basically, like, almost become famous in a way, like, in your local community or even broader, so that it would, like, reflect well back on them, to always be the most well-behaved child who never caused any problems. Like, that was the type of family that I grew up in. And then add on top of that I had a really high pressure school environment as well, very high achieving culture, like, town that I was in. Most of my friends, like, went on to go to Ivy League schools and are, now, like, working at Goldman Sachs and doctors and, like, all this crazy shit. So anyway, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because the voice of my conditioning was so, like, honed into one definition of goodness, into one definition of what it meant for me to be a worthwhile human being, that anything outside of that was just, like, instant tantrum, instant anger, like, instant, I'm gonna shut that shit down so fast. And so this was my first real, like, tangible experience of really trying something that was completely departed from that narrative of, like, what I needed to do in order to be an excellent person or to be lovable in some way. And that voice of intuition, that voice of truth, and how it felt in my body, that clear, calm, spacious, living a little bit further down, it was giving me exactly what I needed in order to grow outside of this one narrow, very unhappy definition of living. It was giving me fun. It was helping me eventually, it would train me to learn that, like, fun is not negotiable. Fun is not optional. Fun is nourishment that we give ourselves. It's like food. We can't expect ourselves to, like, basically be able to keep running as a human organism without regular doses of beauty, of fun, of pleasure. And so this voice of intuition, that clear voice, was already so certain. It just didn't have any pressure associated with it, which is why it took me so long to learn to listen for it. So I'm already going to back up. I have more of this story to tell of, like, how This one experience helped me basically change my careers, helped me leave a terrible relationship, like helped me get to where I am today. But before we move forward, I really want to invite you, take a moment and think about like, when have you felt something that might be a voice of intuition for you? Can you already be curious about when that might have happened for you? And if you have a memory, a specific memory of like when you felt that and you could have listened to it, you could have ignored it, but honestly, none of that matters. It doesn't matter if you listened to it, it doesn't matter if you ignored it. What matters is just noticing the quality of like how that voice felt in your body. Was it like an openness in your chest? Was it an openness in your abdomen? Did it feel like your torso is like a giant cathedral with like lots of space on the inside, open space? Did it feel warm? Like what color was it? This is the type of thing that I want to invite you to get really curious about, because this is what's essentially going to help you begin to build up your own language of intuition and help you figure out how to identify it faster in the future, which is exactly what you need in order to be able to make these kinds of like decisions that um, are sometimes really big and complex and challenging decisions, is being able to notice the quality of the thoughts that are in your head and like, is it coming from a place of pressure and constriction, or is it coming from some kind of like a peacefulness and openness, a curiosity, a playfulness? So please, like, I would love to hear, write in the comments, like, what does this feel like for you? It is really important to notice what it feels like for you. And there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just your language. And you getting to know your own language is what matters. Okay. So here's why this really was important in this at this time period for me to figure out. By listening to that voice and like pursuing knitting of all things, right? This like totally random, totally illogical impulse to do this thing that nobody had ever talked to me about before. I just was like, I'm gonna do this. um, this groundwork that I laid of listening to that was what I needed when I began to contemplate changing my career. And I had the same with crochet, Daisy Cakes says, but I got very frustrated when I could not do it. That happened to me as well. Yeah, I don't know how long you've been here on the live, but yes, at every step of the way, when that voice of intuition said, try making this project, try making this project, try doing this next, I had so much criticism for myself of like, you're doing this wrong, you can't figure it out. Like, this is so simple, you should be able to figure it out instantly. Like, and then there were periods of time where I was like, fuck this, basically. I was like, this isn't worth it. Like, it's not worth it. I'm just gonna go back to like doing whatever I was doing before, which is not having any fun. I'm gonna go back to, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and not wasting time on any of this fun stuff that's not like working out anyway, because I'm such a failure at learning how to knit already. If this is anything like what the narrative was like in your in your head, um this is part of the process of like learning to work with your intuition and work with these other conditioned parts of you. Because it's like, we're not going to talk too much about this today because I think this is outside the scope of the conversation, but I'm so glad that you brought this up. Learning to work with these intense inner criticism voices, these intense perfectionistic voices, these intense voices of like, you're only, it's only worth doing things if you can do them perfectly. Um, this is a journey. This is a practice of its own, and learning to, first of all, understand that those intensely critical voices are there for a reason. They're there to try to protect you from something bad happening, usually. Even if it seems illogical in the moment, like there was a reason probably earlier in your life why your mind body system adopted this voice that was so harshly critical is because it believed that that was going to keep you safe in some way, genuinely, like literal safety, like food and shelter safety. Okay. So there's very real reasons for those voices to be there. And you can slowly unravel them. And this is you can do it. You can do it. I am proof that you can do it because I had such an intensely harsh inner critic that like I was extraordinarily depressed and or wanted to unalive myself at various points in my life. And I don't feel that way anymore very consistently like over the years at this point. So, I know it's possible to unravel these voices. So if you're like, "I don't know how to do this," you can do it. You just need the right support, and you are not flawed, and you are not wrong for having these intense inner critical voices. It is just learning to understand why are they here and what are they trying to protect me from? Well, how are they trying to keep me safe? And then learning to actually, like, be there and comfort and grieve for the things that it's trying to do for you that ultimately it really doesn't need to do anymore. Um, Again, this could be a whole other live, a whole other conversation. And I have a mini course. I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I do have a mini course that I just put out that covers basically the foundations of all of this, of not just what we're talking about today, but how to work with your inner critic, how to begin to unravel those voices of intense criticism and perfectionism, and how to relate to it in a way where it softens it enough that you can like have the freedom to begin to move differently. So if that's interesting to you and it seems like, yes, that's exactly what I'm needing, I have a link in my stories right now. Or actually, no, I don't have a link in my stories. You can DM me burn if you want the link to the mini course. So moving forward, because I actually don't have much time, I need to jump off in about 2 to 3 minutes. This is a much bigger topic, I guess, than I thought it was going to be. But that's great. I'm glad to be talking with you about all of this. So when I was finally having the come to Jesus moment with myself about violin, where I'm like, I just can't. I don't think this is sustainable. There is, that could have been coming from a critical voice, right? It could have been the part of me that's like, you suck at this and you're a failure, so you should clearly just give up. That's not how it felt. And because I had had that foundational experience of listening to that nonsensical voice in my head that said, you should learn to knit, and following it little bit by little bit when I could like gather the courage to keep myself open enough to move from that place, I could tell qualitatively of how this voice felt in my body. And you can see me touching my stomach right now. This voice that said, you're not meant to be doing this. You're meant to be doing something else. And let this go and you'll be free. I even get like shivers and almost like a little tears are starting to come to my eyes, even thinking about how that felt in that moment, because it wasn't quite as playful, let's say, as the you should learn to knit voice, but it was calm, it was spacious, it was deeply compassionate, and with like a sureness and a knowing and a love, knowing how hard it would be for, the conditioned parts of me, the parts of me that needed all of this to make logical sense. It just had this warmth and this love that was like, I know this doesn't make sense right now, but this is the way. And this is the thing, is that for me personally, and this is why for you, you need to begin to pay attention to your sensations of what the narrator in your head feels like in your body, literally. Like, is it tension? Is it spaciousness? Is it warmth? Is it cold? Is it different textures? Like, Get really curious, be an investigator of like what your inner experience is like. And then you're going to be able to create like a map, a data set of like, oh, when I feel these sensations with this voice, that means that it's coming from a place of like fear or anger. Whereas if I hear, this other voice and I have these sensations, that usually means that it's coming from this like playful, curious, and loving place. And if you don't have this like library, this data set built up yet of correlations, essentially, run some tests, like literally be a scientist and be a really like careful researcher of your own experience, and you'll be able to build up that data set. So I was able to let go of violin, let go of this career that I had literally been trained for my whole life to believe that this was like the only thing I could do. This was the only gift that I was given. Um, that, this is, I would be letting down my parents. I'd be letting down everyone who had invested in me. Like, to work so hard, all this work would have gone to waste. Like, I had built up through the knitting and then, of course, through little things that came after that, enough trust in that voice to be like, it doesn't make logical sense to all the different conditioned parts of me. And I know that this is true enough in my lived experience because I've built up the data that this is going to lead to good things for me, that I need to follow it. I can be terrified. I can not know what the fuck is happening. And I know enough that I need to take the very little next step and the very little next step. So that's all the time we're going to have for this discussion today. But please, if you're watching this now or if you're watching the replay, put in the comments, put in the chat, like, what is your felt experience of these like voices in your head? And what data have you already collected about the impact that essentially following the advice of these different narrators has on you, on your happiness, on your fulfillment? I know that if you look back at your life so far, that you have at least one moment of a little glimmer of that voice. And I can't wait to see what you discover when you take the time to actually like feel where that lived in your body and then use that knowledge today, like literally today. So the practical decision making part. If you're trying to decide, am I going to eat Chinese food or am I going to eat like Indian food for dinner? Notice where it lives in your body, like the thought, if you say to yourself, I'm going to eat Indian food versus like, I'm going to eat Chinese food or I'm going to have a burger. Notice where that lives in your body when you say each one of those things to you. I know this sounds so mundane. And I know for a long time I was like, but what about like all the huge decisions that are like so important and it can't be this simple? Babe, it can. It can be this simple. And the reason why it can be is because as you build the reps of noticing where this calm, spacious, curious, playful, knowing, certain voice lives in your body in the mundane levels, this is actually what will help you make all of these more concrete decisions about the bigger things, like what work project do I want to take on and why? What person do I want to hang out with this weekend and why? Like, why do I resist hanging out with this friend? Like, there's must be something about that voice of truth can tell me about like what it feels like to spend time with them and maybe why something about that relationship just isn't working for me. This all stacks up. So my challenge for you this week, today, is to just take 2 minutes, 5 minutes to notice a past experience where you've had that voice and where did it live in your body? What did it feel like? And then see when you're making one simple decision today, if you can notice where the thought of, "Oh, I should do this," versus, "Oh, I should do this," where does that live in your body, and what does it feel like qualitatively? And if this is, like, super helpful, I know for me, this was a fucking game changer, all of this, learning this. Mini course. This mini course will fucking revolutionize your life, I'm telling you. We spend a whole hour talking all about, like, how the different voices in your body, learning to work with the inner criticism, learning how to peel back the inner criticism, and learning how to dissolve all of those thoughts and beliefs so that you have more spaciousness to be able to follow that voice of intuition. Then we talk about, like, how to use that voice and more, like, kind of constructive, concrete, logistical things about showing up in relationships, how to use your emotions and your sensations to help you decide, like, what activities to choose for your work and what you should be doing with your free time. And then also learning how to use your emotions and sensations to make progress on the things that are important to you professionally, personally, in sustainable ways, rather than, like, just always having that voice of criticism, like, steamrolling you into the ground. So if you want the mini course, I'm telling you, this mini course is going to change your freaking life. So DM me burn if you are wanting the mini course, and I will send you all the information about it. DM me burn, and I will get back to you ASAP. Okay, I really have to run. Missy, great to see you. Thanks for being here. Yeah, and you're welcome. Like, I'm so glad you're here. And I will see you in next week's live. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you around. Bye, YouTube.